Welcome to this courageous conversation. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Graham. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the advocacy manager and communications manager at the YWCA of National Capital Area. Thank you so much for joining us today for this final courageous conversation of 2022. Now what? A post-22 election conversation. This election season has been new territory in some ways, with many voters having more than just the candidates on their mind as they head to the ballot box. So for us, we asked, what's next? Where do we stand? And let's talk about it today. Today, we are joined by three panelists, Sabria Still, Erica Teti-Zilinskas, and Lexi White, to have a conversation about what's next in this post-election time as we head into thinking about 2024, and also what you can do to support their on-the-ground efforts today. If you haven't joined us before, these conversations last about an hour with 30 to 45 minutes of panel discussion, and we'll have about 15 to 20 minutes at the end for your questions. A few little housekeeping items. Be sure to introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us why you're here, what you hope to learn today. And if you have any questions during the panel, please put them in the chat as well, and we'll try to hopefully get to a few of them at the end. Also, take a minute right now and make sure that your lines are muted. We'll open up lines at the end for questions with our panelists. And as always, we are a 501c3 organization, and this conversation and resources shared here are nonpartisan. I'd like to pass the mic quickly to our CEO, Monica Gray, for a quick little introduction. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Sarah. And thank you all for joining us this afternoon. As Sarah said, this is a continuation of our Courageous Conversation series, which we launched about 4 years ago to create an opportunity for community members to come together to discuss critical issues, particularly those that impact racial and gender justice and gender and racial equity. These conversations used to take place in person, and they were a wonderful opportunity for us to sit around the table and talk about really important issues in an environment which was really conducive to getting to know one another. But we thought it was important to continue those conversations through the pandemic and consider it where people are as we transition through and hopefully soon out of the pandemic. We decided to keep them virtual until we start the new year, and hopefully we'll be back in person and able to share and have conversations together. The topic of today's conversation, as Sarah indicated, is really looking at where we have landed after this midterm election. While we are a nonpartisan organization, we are a progressive organization. Our mission is to eliminate racism and empower women. And as we see women's rights being peeled back dramatically and shockingly, so as well as racial justice issues being pushed, weaponized, and then being pushed back and peeled back, we recognize that our work is not only not done, but we're in a restart position in some of the work that we're doing, and supporting candidates who advocate for our work and our positions is particularly urgent, particularly, again, as we see a lot of issues that impact the most marginalized members of our community become weaponized in the conversations in the political space. And so this conversation really is about how we, one, encourage more women and people of color to run for public office, as well as our brothers and sisters in the LGBTQI plus community and many other communities around the country who, again, our efforts are being too marginalized and silenced. It's also an opportunity for us to talk about how do you continue to push on progressive agendas in a way that is real, lasting, and meaningful. And also, honestly, what does a restart look like in focusing on some areas of women's rights and, it being in a place where you didn't expect ever to have to be. And so the conversation is really going to hopefully bring us all some level of encouragement to keep fighting the good fight, and also to see where we can be most impactful in the work that we continue to do. And so we have a great group of speakers who Sarah's introduced, and we welcome you all to join us in learning from them and looking at ways that we can continue to make a difference in the country that we all love, but sometimes find a little frustrating.
Thank you, Monica, for that impassioned speech and reminder that all the work we do at the YWCA is mission-driven and focused on eliminating racism and empowering women. I'd like to let's kick this off and let's get it started. Would love to have each of our panelists tell a little bit about themselves and their organization, but also if you could describe how you're feeling today, maybe in one word or a sentence, just so we can get kind of feel of where your head's at. So, Sabria, would you like to go first?
Yes, absolutely. Sarah, I just want to say thank you for activating me. We just met last week, and I asked Sarah what was she doing to stand against racism, and she brought me into the fold of these conversations. So I really appreciate you amplifying my voice and the work that I'm doing for young people here in Maryland and Montgomery County and throughout the nation. So just a little bit about myself, born and raised in here again, Montgomery County, Maryland. I would say I'm like a stateswoman. I love where I'm from. I love this place. I learned so much about it working for the county and the state. And so I was very impassioned about cannabis and just, you know, all of the things that surrounded that a couple years ago. And so I was really moved by the injustices in that space and learned so much more working for the state of Maryland. And so that started when I was about between 16 and 18. So I feel like I'm like a lifelong youth activist. And so I feel like I'm literally living my dream by teaching, you know, reaching back and teaching, you know, young people what I learned and what would have been very impactful at that age. And so really just trying to save them, you know, the time and energy to understand what public service is and that they literally work for us. We do not work for them. And so if they do not hear from us, they don't represent us. They don't hear our needs. And so I've made a recent discovery later on that I want to share and would love to, you know, speak on that once a question is asked. But yeah, just really happy to be here, doing a lot of cool things across the nation, supporting and funding a lot of student-led movements, and really just happy to be here, master networker, coalition builder. So I'm already thinking of ways how we can all just stay connected and really just amplify all the work that everyone's doing. So, and I'm sorry, were you asking too how I feel? One word is grounded. So, and I can popcorn to Erica.
Thank you so much, Sabria. And thanks also to Sarah and Monica and everyone, Lexi for joining us. I'm so excited to be a part of this conversation. I have to tell you, I'm really, it's really just inspired by the group of people on this call, and I hope to shed a little bit of light on what I'm passionate about and the work that we're doing at She Should Run. So about myself, I grew up in the Boston area, moved to DC in 2005, have been working in I would say I caught the nonprofit bug early. While I'm a communications professional by trade, I realized pretty early on that there is so much power in utilizing communications, and that I felt personally like I needed to do something different with the skills that I had been trained in and really excited to learn. So yeah, I started in the nonprofit sector, working in a variety of spaces, the education in LA, and doing some work with AmeriCorps and City Year there, trying to work to just help kids get through school, frankly, in difficult scenarios is the simple way to describe that work. And then more recently, a DC Central Kitchen here in Washington, DC. But truly my work at She Should Run is phenomenally, it's brought me to this interesting point professionally and personally, where I've kind of hit a crossroads in my life as a woman who is identifies as lesbian, is married to another woman, has 2 babies, and is really passionate about the need for representation. I applied for this job at She Should Run to bring my skills to the table, but really to be able to say that, you know, where we're at as a country is just not okay. We're not representative at any level, whether that's the state, the federal, and local communities, not by women, certainly not when you start to look at underrepresented groups. And so at She Should Run, we are, like the YWCA, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that's working to dramatically increase the number of women who consider a run. And so our work, and what I'm really passionate about sharing today and learning from all of you how we can improve this work, is really to help women and citizens see that getting more women into public leadership isn't about training them for candidacy. It's not about identifying the need for fundraising support or media training, and all of those things are relevant, but to drastically increase the number of women in office, we have to think bigger. The very small group of incredibly brave women willing to step up in this increasingly toxic political environment is just not going to get us there. And so our work is about, frankly, Monica, I loved your question of like, how do we encourage more women? And the truth is that's what we're focused on doing. So it's not about the barriers. It's about, frankly, everyday citizens seeing their role as the encourager, if you will, breaking down the stereotypes about what it means to lead, what it means to see women lead, particularly from different backgrounds, and making sure that we're just being really smart about the future that we can build together. So I'm sure we'll come back around, but that's my quick introduction. And my word, honestly, I don't want it to sound ho-hum, but I'm fatigued. I am fatigued. I think while I am happy that there is a lot of celebrating coming out of the midterms, you know, listen, we have 12 governors, 11 of them are white women. We have 1 Latina, and it's still 12. So we're about 25% even in governorship, and there's work to be done. So I'll pause there. Nice to meet you all.
Lexi, I'd love to have you wrap us up here.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lexi White. I use she and they pronouns, and I'm the new policy director with REPRO Rising Virginia. I moved to Virginia in 2019 after spending about 9 years in Philadelphia and doing state and local policy advocacy and organizing work in the reproductive justice movement there. And I came down to continue that work in the national space. And then following the Dobbs decision that rolled back the protections of Roe v. Wade over the summer, I was feeling really called to return to state work because the fight for reproductive justice has always been and continues to be a real battle in the states, and will especially be so moving forward, especially post Dobbs decision. So I'm really excited to get back to state work in my new role. And I will just say, no matter what organizational role I'm in, I always wear the hat of the importance of centering the intersections of racial and gender justice and our advocacy for progressive change, and the many other intersections that come with our identities. I deeply believe in reflective democracy. And so I'm so grateful to be on this panel with you all and to talk about how we shift the balance of power and how we make sure that candidates who represent communities that are most marginalized are set up for success to make change at all levels of government. So thank you.
Well, let's since you have the mic at the moment, let's talk, let's dig into a little bit, share kind of what the landscape looks like for abortion rights, specifically in Virginia right now, especially post post-election, but also in light of the governor's call for a 15-week abortion ban.
Yes. So it's really important to continue to make sure that communities know that abortion is still legal in the state of Virginia. I'm going to talk state level right now, representing where I represent, but so abortion is still legal, but legality has never guaranteed accessibility. And so I think what is really important to continue to uplift is that while the landscape for abortion access feels precarious right now, especially given the promised attacks we've heard from Governor Youngkin, for example, his administration around a 15-week ban, other promises of total bans from conservative actors in the legislature. Abortion has been difficult for many communities to access, even in a landscape where it's been legal for quite a long time. Currently in Virginia, abortion is legal if you are 26 weeks, 6 days pregnant or less, though many and frankly most providers actually stop offering abortion earlier in pregnancy. If you're under the age of 18, a parent or legal guardian has to basically consent for you to get permission to obtain an abortion. And if you don't have a guardian who can do that for you for a number of different reasons, right, you're actually forced to navigate a pretty arduous process called the judicial bypass process, where you have to go before a judge to be deemed, fit to make this decision for yourself. There are currently only 18 abortion clinics in Virginia, and they're actually predominantly located in more urban areas of the state. So Alexandria, Richmond, Virginia Beach, and Roanoke, to name a few areas. But the limited number of locations and providers impacts access, and has always impacted access, but particularly for folks who are struggling to make ends meet, who may be uninsured or underinsured, Black and brown folks who are dealing with the intersection of racism and gender discrimination in their own workplaces, but then also the economic realities that come with that may make it hard to cover the costs of care or to have support. Queer and trans folks living in rural settings. And we're also seeing an influx of patients coming to Virginia from other bordering states where where abortion, has become more restricted. So Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee. We are also seeing, there's also a number of coverage barriers to care. So it includes Medicaid coverage bans on abortion, and public insurance policies only offering coverage for public employees in the cases of life endangerment, rape, or incest. We're also seeing a lot of local attacks, even ahead of the state legislative session, where we're, likely to see a 15-week ban introduced. We are seeing at the county level, in Washington County and Bristol County, zoning ordinances that have been introduced with the intent of pushing abortion clinics out of the area through zoning ordinances. And then even in Virginia Beach, on Monday of this week, there was a city council vote that passed to remove human rights protections established by the Human Rights Commission at the local level that specifically referred to reproductive rights. So that's all that to say is, while abortion is indeed still legal, there are many attacks, and there's a real concerted effort by the opposition right now to continue to push care out of reach. And we're gearing up for that fight heading into legislative session.
Thank you for sharing that overview. I think it's important to note the difference between what's going on in rural parts of Virginia versus, here in the DMV. We tend to think that that's what all Virginia looks like, and that's not necessarily the case. And so I appreciate that insight. I'm gonna move over a little to Sabria to talk a little bit about her work. I think it's wonderful that and that she shared a little bit about her starting her activism as a youth. But as we know, early reports, and I guess they're not early anymore, reports have shown that young folks, and by young folks, I mean 18 to 24-year-olds, showed up this election, especially for progressive causes. And many of those, I would assume, have a planted seed for activism, and it started way earlier than that. So I'd love to hear, Sabria, a little bit about what the Youth Activism Project does to support youth activists, and why, and the bigger why is that important?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really crazy because we just got invited to an event last night. The Hill had a discussion on Gen Z, and it was a really great mix of young people like Gen Z and older folks who are working with Gen Z or who have studied Gen Z and their role in politics. And we just legalized it in Maryland. We have a Black governor. That's never happened before. And we have and we have two 25-year-old Gen Z representatives at the state level. So that is like incredible. Again, that was my first exposure to the inside, the inside, right? I was grassroots organizing around marijuana, and then I got like the actual information that people need on the legislative process, which we don't learn in school. And so I feel like the role nonprofits play in young people's lives, at least in the space that we're in with activism, we're literally filling the gaps in these social studies and social sciences curriculums, which is something I'm super passionate about too. Like everyone's like, when are you going to run for office? And I'm like, well, I would run for Board of Ed. So Erica, like this is, yeah, we're gonna talk. But yeah, like my thing is really like curriculum, and obviously like we're not being set up for success. There's even a difference in college, right? Like there are colleges that teach you how to work, and then there are colleges like Ivy League schools, they don't teach students how to work, they teach them how to be the boss, like the entrepreneur. And so it's education, right? We are trying to fill those gaps with training and mentoring and funds, resources. It's really resources and time that we are trying to equip students with now. We actually have a really great initiative. This is actually pretty freaking spectacular because we're trying to partner now with the Hill. I am just like always trying to figure out like how can we work best, right? So I didn't know that the Hill really facilitates both sides. Like they bring both sides of the aisle to have a civilized conversation. The Youth Activism Project, we partner with Search for Common Ground. This is a peace building organization, one of the largest in the nation. And we came up with a philosophy called Mosaic, where we turn our adversaries into allies. We're trying to find, no, we're not trying, we are finding common ground with reaching across the aisle, finding common ground without compromising our values and beliefs. That has to happen in activism. I know that I wasn't able to do that. I wasn't thinking about that. I didn't have those resources when I was trying to find out what is the solution to getting people out of prison? Like, what is the solution to freeing this plant? What is the solution to housing? What is the solution to traffic? Like all of these ideas, like, but the people that are in power and their conservative views and these old ways and these institutions, we have to, in some instances, meet them where they're at and try to find that common ground. And so if we're equipping 12, 13, 14-year-olds with this information, this doesn't all only translate to their activism, it translates into their life. And so we're really trying to be that connective tissue for young people between like themselves and the resources that we know that would have, really taken our lives into different places. But the lack of resources, I wouldn't change anything about my life because I wouldn't be here. So it's a double-edged sword, right? Like I could have benefited from a lot of different things, but I wouldn't be where I'm at today to talk about that story. So it's really just like, I'm literally word for word, what I heard a young person say yesterday is like, we need to listen. Like, where are these young people at? How do we meet them where they're at? How do we give them resources that we didn't have? And I really see that now with like just even my own childhood and my mom and the resources and the behaviors and patterns that I have. I'm like, okay, if she had those resources, I would have had it. So it's really like learning versus judging. Like, how can I learn from these situations versus judge myself and others for where they're at? So it's really just like the openness, the willingness to help and serve. I feel like we are all here to serve. That is our purpose. And how do you serve? What is that purpose? So I think we're all here serving in our own ways. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think this idea of incorporating that love for activism and civic engagement within the confines of education, I think is a conversation that needs to continue. I mean, we have that internally, have conversations about that a lot, just amongst my colleagues. So thank you so much for sharing a little bit about that. Erica, I'd love to hear about, you mentioned we only have 12 women governors, and only one of them is representative or Latinx or Latina, I guess. And I'm wondering, women are less likely to run for office. They continue to be underrepresented. And I'm wondering what, it sounds like you may be providing this advice to some people on this call. Like, what would you suggest? What advice would you give to a woman considering a run for office, specifically in the confines of what She Should Run provides?
Thank you so much for the question. And I just have to say, Sabria, I am so motivated and inspired by the work of the Youth Activism Project. I'm like, we absolutely have to work together. Not to do the media thing where I pivot from the question Sarah asked me, but I just have to say it's so, what you're articulating so rings true to the work that we're trying to drive home at She Should Run, which is, listen, our democracy only stands to benefit, right, from the different lived experiences that people, but women and particularly underrepresented women currently bring to the table. And so we have, I feel, at She Should Run, a responsibility to work together to bring them into office. And I do think it starts certainly at a very, it starts young and helping, young women and girls realize that they do have a voice and that they can use it in a lot of different ways, some that are obvious and some not so much. But I think to answer the question, or to try to answer the question directly, Sarah, about what I would say to a woman who's considering, I would say, great, consider it, absolutely. If you decide not to run, that's okay too. You still have a role to play. And I think that is a cultural shift that we need to make as a country, to say that, activism can certainly lead to increased civic engagement. And I hope that you do run for school board, and we need more women to make those leaps. But it's about, I think, and what we're really uncovering, frankly, through recent research that we are releasing right after the Thanksgiving holiday. So be on the lookout for that. But the nugget really is, it's not a shock. Women are not a monolith. People are different and come from different backgrounds, and that's a good thing. But it does mean that the strategies that it takes for someone to realize they have what it takes and take that leap look very different than for someone else. And so it's about, I think, bringing people along. We're definitely really focused on making sure that certainly when someone comes in and says, I want to run, 80% of them already knew they were going to run. That's been a really interesting eye opener for us in our research. When you really look at the marketing, and frankly, the majority of my peers in the field, the work and the curriculum that's developed for this field is developed for the 2% of women, the Nancy Pelosi's of the world, that had a family of political office, and that was the right next step, and she's known it her whole life. But the truth is, we really need to think differently about what it looks like to help women realize that it might not be tomorrow that someone takes the leap to running for elected office. It might be 10 years from now, but understanding the relevance of their role, whether they're an encourager, whether they're someone that says, listen, you have all the makings of someone who can really benefit our community. You're already on the school board, or you're on the PTA, or you're the person that, the HOA assistant team calls in your condo board and is like, what is happening with this? You have to fix this, right? Like, these are the women that we need to see lead. So I would say, short answer is yes. You need to run for office. But if you don't and you're not ready, there's still a role to play. And we're here at She Should Run to help women of all backgrounds figure out what that is, because there is meaning there.
I like this idea of role to play, that it doesn't look one way for everyone, and that you shouldn't be deterred if you decide the way you initially thought was not the way to go. I appreciate that. I think that applies to a lot of things, but particularly when it comes to civic engagement, for sure. I think I think this is a good time to kind of switch to a little bit about like what resources that each of your orgs provide for folks. So I think, Erica, if you want to just kind of keep talking about what your org provides. I know you
Yes.
tease something that's coming, but
yes, absolutely. I'm happy to talk more about it. Thank you for asking. So, listen, traditionally the work of She Should Run, we've been around for 10 years. It's been a real pivot for us to, in the last 3 years, I think, further solidify the role of the top of the funnel. I did cut my hand, so you have to acknowledge the Band-Aid. But there's like, when you look at the funnel of women's leadership, we're all the way up here, because I would never consider running for office. I know nothing about politics. This is like not the environment for me. Those are the women we are trying to reach. And then you work your way down the funnel and you realize there's the women that have already decided they want to run and they need to move on to candidate training. They need to learn how to fundraise. They need to learn what it looks like to build a campaign team. And at She Should Run, we value and support those women. We do have tools and partners in our network to connect them to the tangible skills they'll need to kick off a campaign. But our work and our programming is more about, frankly, the self-exploration, the uncovery of what it looks like to realize your own leadership. And so we have a couple different ways we do that. One is a recent offering we've launched called Power and Purpose. It's exactly as you would think. It's really, right now it's offered in a workshop series. We're looking at maybe doing something like an audio do it at your own pace, listen and follow a workbook. People do not have time to sit in front of Zooms and webinars, and drop off is terrible. So let's get it on a podcast or something. So anyway, but the goal of that program is really about making sure that, again, women are realizing, like, I think I have something I care about in my community. Like, maybe it is abortion access is firing up a lot of women today to say they want to take a role, but they don't know what that is yet. And so Power and Purpose is about, okay, how do you take your values from your upbringing in your life to a cause you care about today and start thinking about what those next steps could be. We also offer what we call the 4 steps to a better community. So that's really tangible takeaway bits of action that women and men or anyone identifying on the spectrum, frankly, can do to identify ways in their everyday life that they can contribute more meaningfully to their own communities, and what that looks like to break that down in attending a school board meeting or attending the town council meeting, understanding what's on your local ballot, right? Participating in the midterms. Like, it's a shock that we had the turnout we did this year. Let's be honest, not everyone always pays attention. So knowing that there were issues that brought people out is great, but we need to do that even when there aren't such hot topics on the ballot. And so to get there, that's really where our new work is leading us to at She Should Run. And what the research is going to talk about in early December is, again, acknowledging that the resource to date, including She Should Run's programming, frankly, up until recently, was really focused on the woman who knew she wanted to run. It was about how to run for office with debt, how to address sexism, these really important tools. But now we're realizing that we have to build an ecosystem because there are not enough women, understandably, that have it within them that are just going to wake up and say, this is the path for me. It needs to be part of our fabric of a possibility, creating this idea that civic engagement is meaningful, even if you're not the elected official, again, that there's a role to play, and helping people understand what that looks like. So there will be what is coming out is the first activation that we've ever tried. It's a test, but to see what it looks like to shift the focus away from the women that we want to run and work as a nation at building the ecosystem. So really helping people see that the role of changing our democracy and building the future that we want to see is our responsibility. And we all have to take, frankly, if I bet half the women on this call could walk away and say, I know 3 people in my life that are amazing and should 100% be running for school board or local office. Well, then we need to be resetting the mindset that that is normal and that's natural, and that you should be having those conversations with people to start the dialogue and creating the ecosystem early to support them. And yes, you're being recruited.
That
right
she
now.
should run, right? It's in your name. Yeah.
Yes, like it's just, I'm so inspired and happy to answer more questions about that if there are any.
No, Erica, thank you so much. As we do on these calls, I like to provide resources to the folks that have attended. So we'll be sure to include Power and Purpose and some of those other resources that you guys have to this group. And my brain's already running about some people that I think maybe could consider running for public office. So Lexi, we've been talking a lot, and I really think it's important to give I appreciate, like I said, as I mentioned, I really appreciate you giving your idea of an overview of what's going on in Virginia as far as abortion access, but I'd love if you could share some ways that people can plug in, maybe some untraditional ways they haven't thought about before to help support abortion access in your state.
Yes, absolutely. So REPRO Rising, we are a grassroots political and policy leader in the abortion access movement in Virginia. And we're also deeply committed to making sure that all Virginians have access to the full range of reproductive healthcare options, despite their socioeconomic status, despite their geographic location. A program I wanted to make sure to uplift today is our Practicab program, which is a program that trains abortion doulas to drive people to and from their abortion appointments for free, and to also provide emotional support. This came out of conversations with abortion funds in the Commonwealth of Virginia, who saw this as a critical gap they needed to fill, especially amidst the influx of patients that we are seeing in Virginia. Like I said before, folks coming from bordering states at this time, where Virginia is still a safe haven for abortion care. And so we're actually planning to more than double this program in the next few months, and are actively, seeking out folks who are interested in getting this training, and hopefully after doing the training, making a commitment to fielding some of these requests for support in transporting folks and providing emotional care to folks who are seeking abortion care. I'll now plug my political call to action, which is certainly my wheelhouse, and would invite folks to consider being active with us this upcoming legislative session. In Virginia, it's a pretty short legislative session in Virginia, running, January 11th until early March. So it moves very fast. And we're going to need all hands on deck, both on rapid response. So making sure our legislators know that we reject all bans to abortion care that we might see in the legislature. But to also help us do the work of destigmatizing basic reproductive health care, changing hearts and minds around this issue in our own families, communities, where we live. Some of our proactive advocacy efforts include wanting to see an increase in the number of providers, OBGYNs, pediatricians, family practitioners that also offer medication abortion to their patients, so that it's more accessible and to create more opportunities for self-managed care. We want to fully decriminalize pregnancy outcomes in the Code of Virginia. Again, repeal all coverage bans in the Code of Virginia. And also legislate contraceptive access as an essential healthcare benefit that is free for all who need it. And my big plug is also that we are working on a multi-year effort to enshrine the right to reproductive freedom in Virginia's state constitution. We saw this in the most recent election in many states. Kentucky, Kansas, Virginia, California, Michigan, that abortion is an issue that voters support, and often even in places where you might think that they don't. And so when we put it on the ballot, when we leave it to voters, we really believe that we can win. In Virginia, you have to pass a constitutional amendment in 2 consecutive legislative sessions with an intervening House election in order for it to then go on the ballot. So we are working to introduce an amendment this year, more as a political strategy, a base building and messaging effort, an effort to expose bad actors in the legislature and amplify our supporters. But realistically, we have to flip the House and we have to pass this consecutively in 2025 and 2026 so that voters can see it on the ballot by the fall of 2026. So this is obviously a multi-year campaign, but it's one that requires our work now in order to get us prepared for a climate where we can be successful, and we're going to need all hands on deck. So would, yes, encourage folks to also follow our work at REPRO Rising VA on social media, and to plug in, where you feel like you can, where you feel like you can, and we'd be happy to work with you.
Thank you so much. We will share all of that information with this group, but also you and I can talk about where our why can definitely support you in on the ground efforts. As you can see behind my my head, we do that often. So let's I want to conclude with Sabria, sorry. Really, I'd love for you to share like how adults can support youth activism, a couple of ways that they can do that today.
Yes, I'm going to lead with no gatekeeping. I feel like gatekeeping is just kind of like a natural maybe feeling just through all of these institutions and systems that we've been operating in for generations. Another cool thing I learned about last night with Generation Z is they are more than willing to come together as a generation to do whatever it takes for us to like move on from like the past and past ways, past institutions. And so if you have access to resources, like please let these people on this panel know, like we need resources to do the work. So if you're connected to money, like we need money to do this work. So please do not gatekeep. Another great call to action is our organization is working with the Drum Major Institute, which is Martin Luther King III and his wife, Andrea King, and his daughter, Yolanda Renee King. we are convening on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which is a day on, not a day off. We are trying to reimagine what that day looks like here in the nation's capital. So at his memorial site, which is at the wharf, we plan to have everyone come and at the Drum Major Institute. So everyone gets a chance to meet Martin Luther King Jr. and his family every single year. And we're going to go out into the community and help 10 local organizations in both the District of Columbia, the state of Maryland, and the Commonwealth of Virginia. That is something that I'm trying to cultivate, and we need all hands on deck as well, Lexi. So any and all support that we can get, we need it. And so, even if there's we're asking something and you think of something else, like we're all like in this creative and giving flow. So please, Sarah, I'm sure you'll share my email. I can drop it in the chat as well. But this is just it's my email and our website. We can always use donors and volunteers, anyone that has been historically a organizer. Like, children need to hear from that. It's also really good for them to see themselves in the organizing. So if you know any young people that I can help and support and bring into our cohort of leaders, like, please let me know. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're coming up on our end of our panel, and I just wanted to give each panelist, about 15-30 seconds to provide any other calls to action or ways that folks could support. I know you provided a lot of resources, but if you've got one thing you want to ask from this group, now's your time. So don't go all at once.
Ask a woman in your life to consider leading in this way. Truly, it sounds so small, but it is how we're going to change the future together. We have to think differently about what leadership looks like. People have no problem at all meeting folks and saying, like, you're going to run a business one day, or you are such a wonderful baker, like, you should open a bakery. Well, there's a lot of wonderful skills and attributes that everyone can bring to the table. So creating a culture to think about that. So I'll share our website. Certainly follow us on social at She Should Run. We will be announcing, like I said, in December, this like 2-week activation. I just can't give it to you now, but the materials are free, and we'll have a landing page, and it's like literally meant to put this to action to see if people pick it up on their own. So that was more than 30 seconds, but I'm done.
I'm sorry, I can go next. I would say if there's anyone that has been impacted by Martin Luther King's legacy, we are trying to fundraise $5 million in the next 5 years. So if you know anyone that would want to support that, please contact me. Thank you.
My final call to action would be to just stay politically engaged and active, continue to pay attention. In Virginia, we have a special election coming up in Senate District 7, and we want to continue to turn folks out to vote in all of these elections. We have to support folks who are advocating for a full range of reproductive health care and normalizing that as a part of the conversation. And so my part 2 to that is, again, continue to do the work of destigmatizing abortion care and destigmatizing reproductive health care more broadly, and not being afraid to have the conversations to change hearts and minds around these issues.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this engaging conversation. Each of you provided lots of resources and lots of calls to action. Looks like we've got maybe some future candidates amongst this group. So that's always exciting to hear. I wanted to open up the floor for any questions that folks may have. And we can do that now. So feel free to come off mute if you've got something you want to ask. Wow, we're such a quiet bunch. I think it's just a lot to process, which is understandable.
Can I ask a question that's
Yeah, go
this
ahead.
is such this is such an inspiring group. You know, I'm from a whole different generation where you know, women hardly were participating at any level. And today is so entirely different. I wonder, maybe Erica, do you have a sense of what like the increase has been, say, in this decade, or maybe since I don't know, say since Obama, that 2016 or something like that. Do you know what we're doing? How well we're doing?
I have to tell you this, the honest, sad truth is exactly the same. Overall, really? And that's what's really shocking. Yeah. And so we did see, especially in 2016, we saw a lot of anger Googlers who joined our community, and there was a lot of effort and excitement at that time. But it just goes to show you that even, you know, one spark of rage isn't enough in this climate to move women through the journey that is necessary before they make that decision to run for office. So I know it's hard. Listen, it goes back and forth. Like we even had a presentation yesterday on state legislatures in particular. The sad truth is there. The record was broke in 2002, I think, with the number of state legislatures that were women at that time, not even broken down by geography or other demographic. And that was the record last year, or as this election would end, we were behind. And we're even further behind when you look at 2023. Now it's small percentages, but it still hovers at about a third of all elected offices.
I'm really shocked at that. I thought you were going to give me a different answer. That's amazing.
I know, it's really sad. And people tend to think about it as what they see, you know, which is at the federal level and Congress and your representatives. But, you know, we're not equally represented, you know, on most town councils either. So there's just a real culture shift that needs to happen.
I used to have a former boss who would talk about sustained outrage, and that really is this idea of motivating. And that it seems like it has to be sustained for a long time to affect dramatic change. Anybody else? Oh yeah, go ahead.
I don't know how I did not share this information, but Erica, you said you're in Montgomery County too, right?
I am. Yep.
Okay, so the county council, for the first time ever, we have Latina, Asian, and Black representation, majority female for the first time ever. Like, and I just was working for a council member, so like that was just absolutely bonkers for me. And Lorianne Sales, she represents the entire county, and she's African American. So like, there's like Maryland, we're kind of moving some things forward.
It's true. It's true. I think I'm allowed to say this, that in my off work life, I'm a volunteer with Moms Demand Action. And the work for Maryland overall was really remarkable. Like that, we have a very active state. So kudos to everyone involved.
Noted. all your hats. I like it.
Can I tell a story about Montgomery County? My friend in my White House Fellows class was Ike Leggett. When he first ran for the council in Montgomery County, he did not reveal that he was African American for a very, very long time. And that was how bad it was. You know, to even have pictures was bad. They wouldn't vote for you. So this would have been in the late 70s, early 80s. I mean, not that long ago. So, yeah. But he won, and then he went on to be county council chair. But yeah.
Well, I'll leave us there. As always, our mission at the YWCA is to eliminate racism and empower women. And if that motivates you, it is the season of giving. So feel free to check out our website and donate to our cause. We also are currently recruiting for and sponsoring a angel tree for the families that are served by our food pantry. So if you have some toys that you'd like to donate to us, we are taking those at the moment. So and Giving Tuesday is coming up. All of these orgs on here, I'm sure, are planning great, wonderful things for Giving Tuesday. So keep that in mind as well. I will send out a link to this presentation and also some of the resources and all the contact info for the folks that we had joining us today. Monica, is there anything you'd like to close us out with?
No, I just want to thank our panelists for a great conversation and some wonderful information and some great inspiration, encouraging everyone to, consider engaging folks in all of the many causes that we have before us, and keep fighting the good fight. The reality is that sometimes it feels like you're taking a step backwards, and sometimes it takes that sort of stumble backward to reset yourself and start running forward. So, nope. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks, folks. We'll close here. Bye, y'all.